Benny on a soul road. It's a savage world, strange as a wind roar. It's a savage world, passage to explore. It's a savage world.
And you just probably watched the first half of the video, and it sounded like it was going to go, a huge long one, but I cut it right in the middle, and so we're going to roll into the second one. Thank you for watching.
He used his magical great editing, great X,
cut.
And cut it right in half. Yeah. Okay.
And we're back. Okay. Hey.
Barbarian. So all of these will have some prerequisites: strength of D6 and a vigor of D6. So let's talk about when new things come up. I'll bring them up, and then we'll just kind of run through everything. So here's the first big thing. Now, I said before that all of these edges are kind of like super edges. I think they're generally worth like a normal edge plus 0.5, like as far as advancement terms, like almost like 2.5. But across all of these, I like some of them. The big problem is I don't think all of them are balanced. I definitely don't think all of them are balanced from not even just a representing Pathfinder way. I definitely think some are just flat out better than the others. And I'm not talking about thematically. I'm just talking about as far as balance.
The mechanics.
Mechanically, these are just not all balanced at all.
Okay.
So that's just an upfront.
Let's talk about the barbarian.
So the first thing that a lot of these have, some of these will have drawbacks, and they're kind of their biggest drawbacks is what I mentioned in the first video, are these armor restrictions. There's 4 types of armor in the game. Cloth, light, medium, and heavy. And then there's also 3 types of shield levels. There's the light, medium, and heavy, or tower shields, I think, something like that. So the main kind of drawbacks that classes you'll see, which makes sense from Pathfinder, because a lot of the Pathfinder classes had this.
Right.
The only difference is that in this, it's not that you couldn't wear. You can't. So barbarians have medium armor restriction. It's not that you cannot wear heavy armor. You just take a -4 to agility and agility-based skill rolls, which is like fighting, which is horrible. So you're just heavily penalized. Bad. So yeah, barbarians get that armor restriction medium. They get the fast trait.
Right.
And then they get
plus
the rage. Rage ability. So yeah, so fast is +2 to pace. And just that. And then they get rage. Now rage is different from how it is in normal Savage Worlds. So in this rage, it can be used. So here's the key differences. It can be used at any time as a free action. It also, if they're shaken or wounded, they have to make a smarts roll. And it's automatic. It only lasts 5 rounds, which is similar, but the big difference is they can't ever choose to not. So in the normal one that you could roll to try to end it. In this, it just lasts 5 rounds, and then you take a fatigue that that has to be recovered with an hour's rest. The other difference
if you're already fatigued or you're already exhausted, then you're incapacitated.
Yeah.
So it uses it uses fatigue rules and the progression.
Yeah, it uses the fatigue rules. Yeah. Here's what rage does. So when you're raging, it increases your strength die one step, and then you have to wild attack, which is the same, I believe. Now here's the big difference. In the other one, you got a bonus to your toughness. Here you ignore 2 points of wound penalties and all fatigue penalties, and this stacks. And then you have that reckless abandon, which is the same thing, where a critical failure hits a different target. So let's pause here and talk about this. So I see what they're doing, because before we get your opinion on this, Carl, in Pathfinder, this is being represented well, because in that you take a minus to your AC, but you have a big bonus to your HP, I believe, which is kind of how I guess they're representing that. I guess wild attack already kind of gives, and they get damage bonuses. So wild attack kind of you're easier to hit, but here it's that ignoring 2 points of wound penalties. But I don't like this. I don't know. Let me hear your opinion first.
Well, but I mean, this is the mechanics of Savage Worlds you have to play with, right? So the getting more hit points doesn't exist.
Well,
right?
let me throw it right back at you, because here what I was saying was, oh yeah, okay, well you'd really want. So the problem I have here, and this is from a representative view, and also from just a general balance. You'd really want to ignore these fatigue penalties. Ignoring wound penalties is good, but also that you really want like more wound cap. You want your wound cap to go up. But the only edge you can ever take is at legendary, which is kind of like, that's a long way to wait. Because also once your rage is over, you're fatigued and you stop ignoring all this stuff. So all this stuff just comes back. I really wish instead of this, they just increased maybe your wound caps while you were raging, as well as this. Maybe like deducted this a little bit. I don't know.
But you're still gonna get that problem if you increase the wound cap while you're raging. Because if you let's you raise it to 4, if you hit 4 and then you stop raging, what does that mean?
Well, then I kind of think it would go. Yeah, I get what you're saying, but like I feel like you could have worked out something where like if you were over that threshold, you would treat it when you go back as you have this many less wounds, and then so if you were in being,
maybe you could have done something where it ignores if you're shaken and you get hit again for a shaken, you get a wound. Maybe you ignore that.
The hardy, yeah, which is there's an edge for that. There's a edge. I'm getting feet edges. An edge, yeah. So yeah, this definitely does. I would say this definitely does represent 1E well, but I'm a little bit on the fence as from a fantasy game standpoint. This might not be as good as just normal rage. You might just want to use the normal rage rules, right? I don't know how you like this compared to the normal berserk. Sorry, not rage, berserk.
I think it gives a different flavor, and I would think you could just pick the one you like, which the flavor you like better. Just run with it. Again, that's house rule it. You don't have to. I see where they're coming from. I know what they're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah.
So it seems okay to me. I mean, I'm not a big. I don't play barbarians generally because I don't like the idea of being out of control. In the sense of, I rage, I do all this, some great stuff, but then I'm out of control and I could hit, a friend, and then I have to rage for 5 rounds, and I that's not my jam. But for other people, I could see where this would be kind of a fun thing to, get that strength die, do the wild attack. That's what they do anyway. They jump, so. The
rage part is definitely, I'm fine with. Like, that needed to be there. That's what kind of the barbarian trope, and that's what Pathfinder's about, and that's what most fantasy games have. I'm just the whole ignoring the wound penalties while you're taking damage and you're not being affected by it. So I guess, but you're not really tanking in that way. In Pathfinder, they get so much extra hardiness. So I don't know. It's a little difficult as far as.
You're living within the system, right? So
let's talk about the other features. So the other.
Sure,
so this is now we're going to talk about like the ones that you get when you're leveling up. Powerful blow
when you're seasoned.
Wild attacks just do an extra 2 damage. So just kind of akin to barbarians doing more damage. Intimidating glare. This one's a little weird.
Veteran.
When the action card is a jack, you get a free action to do intimidation. Okay. I
think when we did our edges video way back when, we never were big fond of the edges that required you to get a specific card to be useful.
Yeah, it's definitely hard because
Here's another example.
A jack or higher, like that's gonna. That's like a face card. You're getting up there as far as. So you definitely want quick, I guess, for this. You're probably not going to be smart. So and this one, like if I'm remembering when I read through all the 1E ones, I don't really see an exact equivalent. There are so in Pathfinder 1E, there's I'm not a fan of it. I really wish, because in Pathfinder 1E, barbarians have a lot of kind of like rogue defenses where they can see traps, or they're really good at like dodging area effect stuff. Like they're very kind of mobile. They're kind of another mobile striker a little bit, are kind of more tanky in that way. being able to just kind of like recognize threats. So I almost wish that was there instead of Intimidating Glare. Because that's almost like, that's almost like you build your character that way. It's not really a class thing necessarily. Yeah, that one I'm not great on. And then Strength Serve, when they're raging, it goes up 2 die. Sure, yeah. I mean, more strength is good, more damage is good. I think that fits.
And it's at heroic level.
It's at heroic, but
it seems it's I don't know. Maybe it's just my perception, but okay, that's great. But I wanted more at heroic level.
Yeah,
than just
I mean, almost do that plus 2 at the Intimidating Glare level, and then have something else there. I don't know. So overall, I mean, I think I kind of want to rate these 1 out of 10.
1 out of 10.
1 out of 10.
We're
I would say
the
Barbarians. Barbarians
okay.
is kind of like my second least favorite one out of all of these. So I'm definitely kind of giving this a 5, or maybe like a 6 as far as representing the Pathfinder first class. Yeah, maybe more of a 6 because generally it's good, but definitely like a 4 as far as you're getting some advantages here, but sorry.
You're having an
maybe a little bit higher than that. I this is just pretty meh to me. Like, this is the only way to get all this strength and doing extra damage, but it's mainly that Intimidating Glare. So this is pretty much like a 5 or 6 on both. How do you feel about it?
Okay, 5 or 6. So right in the middle. You're right in the middle on this guy. So
kind of below average.
Again, not a fan of the out of control stuff, but it represents a barbarian well as far as the basics of what a barbarian is. Some of the the edges might be a little rough, like the fact that you get this Intimidating Glare. It's not really that interesting. So I don't know. 6 seems reasonable.
Okay, moving on to the bard.
Everybody's favorite bard.
We'll just run through these. We'll run through each thing and then we'll talk about them as we go. So bards have that requirement of a spirit of D6 and performance of a D4. Bards being a spellcasters, and now all the spellcasting classes will get this. Well, they get. First of all, the big thing that bards get is they get an arcane background, 3 starting powers and 10 power points, and then they have a power list. That I'm not going to read them through here, but it definitely did a good job as far as fitting the type of bard magic that's usually there. The big thing is and all the spellcasters will get this, they get a increase in their spellcasting. But the bards get a very specific little thing, is that they actually use performance for their spellcasting, not spellcasting or anything else. So bards get a die type to their performance, which is, so they're usually going to start at a D6 or higher, because they have to have a D4 in performance to get this. They have the armor interference of light, which means that they're kind of restricted, remember what we talked about, to light armor. And then they get sharp tongue, where they actually they can use performance as taunt to test a foe.
Which is cool.
Oh, yeah. They get to ignore the kind of repetition advice that is normally for Savage Worlds, where if you do the same kind of test or support over and over again, the GM will penalize you. Also, performance is used as taunt to meet edge requirements. So this is that initial thing. This is great. This is awesome. I mean, anytime that you can use a skill for many things is really good. But I think right? I mean, you'll agree with me on this.
I think this is because what's always nice is when you stack on top of a skill you're going to have anyway.
Yes.
So your performance is, you're going to be jacking that up because that's your arcane ability. And so now Sharp Tongue comes along, which is also using it, and it also uses it for edge requirement. I mean, that's brilliant.
That's great.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, definitely gives you that the maxing side of that.
For
that
sure.
really focus on.
And yeah, like I said, we'll run through these, then we'll go give our kind of full impressions. Inspire Heroics. Now
that's a season.
It's a seasoned edge. Now, Pathfinder 1E, it's a little bit different how they did it, where in the kind of the first level you would have different performance abilities unlocked right away. They kind of had to spread these out. But Inspire Heroics is once during any combat encounter, the bard can spend a penny and gain 5 inspiration tokens. Those inspiration tokens can be given out within a range of smarts, which is interesting. They didn't use spirit. I have to assume that's for balancing purposes. because normally you would really think it would be either the range of performance and spirit. So it's kind of weird there, but I just have to assume it's for balancing. And you can't use it on yourself, and you can use it to give to somebody, and they can give an automatic reroll of a trait or damage roll. So basically, they can trade in 1 Benny and get 5 bennies that they can spend on other people, not even on their turn.
But they're not bennies. They're kind of bennies light.
They're bennies light because it doesn't trigger Elan or anything.
It doesn't it doesn't allow you to do things, gain action cards or soaking wounds or
anything like that. But it can be used to reroll. So let's actually go through everything. Then we'll talk about our impressions for everything.
Sure.
At veteran level, they have Countersong. We're within 5 inches.
Countersong.
Everybody just the bard and all allies within 5 inches. They get a free reroll on opposing enemy spells effects or attempting to recover for them. So that's just for any type of spells. Within 5 inches, there's just this aura where they get free rerolls. And then finally, Dirge of Doom, where at his discretion, an enemy who spends a Benny to soak or reroll a trait or damage roll within 10 inches, and line of sight of the bard, subtract 2 from his final total.
So it's like negative Elan.
A negative thing. I'm just going to say first, bards are absolutely freaking amazing. They are... oh my god, this is probably my favorite one. I mean, you could see a lot of these are kind of support and debuff and buff. They did such an amazing job. I mean, this is almost the overpowered one. They did an amazing job of capturing the feel of the bard. Now, it's kind of interesting to me is that they almost I feel like they got some inspiration from Tui on this, because Tui has a thing where bards kind of use performance for a lot of different... They have one of the muses allows them to use performance for a lot of different things, which is kind of what they did here. But, I think they did it really just... Before we talk about mechanically, they did do a very good job of representing the bard abilities in Pathfinder and representing it well in Savage Worlds. Now, a lot of these things, like, I believe, inspired heroics... And what is it? Inspire Heroic, Countersong, and Dirge of Doom. A lot of those, like, you get kind of at like Countersong and I believe Countersong and Inspire Courage are all first level abilities in Pathfinder, but obviously they just couldn't give bards all that stuff right away. So you're not going to get that same feeling of getting it all up front. You are going to have the feeling of using performance for everything, But so as far as representing, just from me talking about purely from representing Pathfinder in this, you're going to get a feel of using performance as your main thing. I mean, it really is. But you're not going to get that same feeling of like the way Pathfinder worked until you're much higher level in this. But let's talk about mechanically, Carl. What are your thoughts?
Well, like I said, I think, whenever you can stack... And leverage a skill for multiple things that are important to your class. Yeah. That's huge, because every point, the more you have to spread out your skill points, the less effective you can be. But now you get to double up without having to worry about, I spend some on an arcane ability and I want to spend some on performance, and then I need to spend some on persuasion, and you get some benefit there. I think bards are very, very well represented here for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and then so just so you know that the powers that they have, there's no damaging powers. Now, we haven't seen any other spellcasters. We're about to see one, but just so people realize that most of the other spellcasters have these 2 edges. One is where they get to ignore penalties. The other one is where they get the like epic powers. Bards don't have that. So bards are certainly a spellcaster, but they don't get like the... they don't have the mastery of spells that a lot of the other ones have. But, oh my god, Carl, Inspire Heroics, I really think that bards have just every one of their edges is so good. And even that, the way I'm seeing this, like, as a kind of debuff and buff character, a support character, this is kind of the most fun I've ever seen a support character be. I mean, getting 1 Benny... Being able to, at every encounter, being able to trade in 1 Benny for 5 bennies that you can spend on your friends, when they're doing stuff is so amazing. I mean, Countersong, it's not like the best thing. It's only against powers, but it's just always on. It's always on. You're always getting that benefit. And then Dirge of Doom, again, being able to do that, you don't have to spend anything to do that. That's just always on. 10 inches. Anytime the enemy does something to soak or reroll a trade, anytime they want to do anything with spending their bennies, you're just screwing with the GM at that point. You're just totally. This is the biggest poke the GM in the eye. I mean, it just seems like all those things where in other games it might not be as fun. Like all of these things are just really fun. Inspire Heroics and Dirge of Doom just seem like so much fun to me. Being able to manipulate.
That just means the game master is going to have bards in the opposing parties. That's all it means.
I really think that. I mean, bards are so good. I think they did a really good job hanging out of the park. But I almost think mechanically they did. I'm saying they're a 10. I honestly think they're a 10.
Yeah, that's definitely
10, but they're almost overpowered. Like I
got a little OP action.
I almost think they're too strong, but they just seem like. Man, I mean, I really like 2e bards, but holy crap, I want to play bard in this. Like, they just did so well, right? I mean, is that how you feel, Carl? 10-10?
Oh yeah, it's really well done. I don't know if I can say much more than that. Really well done.
Okay.
All right, let's talk the classical cleric.
Let's talk cleric. So clerics have a prerequisite of a requirement of a spirit of D6, and they have to take a specific vow, which is major serve
for their deity.
Now here. Clerics I do have some issues with. We'll talk about it at the end. We'll talk about that. So you have to take this major vow to serve your deity or domain. Because in Pathfinder, just so that you know, clerics don't actually always have to follow a specific deity. They can also kind of follow a ideal or philosophy in a way, but that's usually up to GM's discretion. So I wish that they called that out here more. And I would say that if you're running a Pathfinder game or even any type of fantasy game, that just assume that it's a deity and not a specific domain. And the reason that they did that is we'll talk about that once we get into domain. So this is going to be the most we're talking about probably. But anyways, so that aside, the first feat they get spellcasting, where they get faith and they get a D4 in faith, or if you already spent skill points in a faith, you get that increase. They get 10 power points. They start with the healing power and 2 others chosen from their domain. They get channel energy, where healing power has a range of spirit rather than touch. And it also gains an additional recipient's power modifier. It means they can heal more than one person at once. And then they have sins, and sins are their drawback. So they have no armor drawback, but they have the sins, and those are equal to the domains. So let's actually real quickly go over to domains. Let's talk a little bit about deities and domains. So when you choose a deity, and there's a list, I believe... where's the list?
Page 50.
Okay, so there's a list of kind of like Pathfinder deities, which can easily be, you can make your own, because they do make... This is easy to make your own deity, where based on their alignment, you give them different domains. So each domain, so domains are, they have different aspects to them, and then they list the deities, and then they basically have, the main thing what domains have is they have the power list that you have for each domain, and they have the sins, which is like, it tells you what the minor sin is, what the major sin is, what the mortal sin is. And this was definitely a callback to the Fantasy Companion from the other one. So things like the death domain, which is just the first one, the minor domain would be granting mercy to a foe, healing non-believers, failing to pray at a graveyard. The major one is celebrating life and liberty, and the mortal sin is willfully preventing birth or death. So what that means is that when you commit one of those sins, a minor sin is -2 to your faith roll for a week. Major sin robs you of all powers for a week, and a mortal sin, basically you can't even use anything until you do a major quest. So this is like a role-playing thing that has mechanical drawbacks, is kind of what they're looking at here. So I think let's...
And you mentioned, and I think you mentioned before, the deities. You mentioned, I think, in the previous video, where the deities aren't so black and white in the different areas, or in this case, for all these different domains. Do they work out well from a Pathfinder standpoint, from a mapping standpoint?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if we talked about the thing, but I know that me and you talked about it, where this is kind of a tricky part for me. I understand they had to work this out for mechanically, and this is better for like a companion mode, but this is not really good for Pathfinder, because they're kind of putting the sins in the domain, but like if we just look at death, right? We have Asmodeus, which is the king of hell. We have Urgathoa, which is kind of an evil death god. Go figure. And then we have Ferasam. Now, Ferasam is the kind of neutral god of death in Pathfinder. Ferasam is kind of she's in her own demi-plane. She kind of judges everybody. She's the one who like judges and makes sure they go to like the right afterlife. So so when you look at those sins, those are very much not her sins. Right. Really. So this right here is kind of one of the biggest misses, I think, as far as Pathfinder converting. And I'm not going to give a full like what I would do instead right now. This doesn't quite work, really. You're not going to get that same feeling as you do with Pathfinder, just because the deities, like, they're the ones who should have the sins, because different, like, there can be a good god of death, honestly, and there can be an evil god of death. Like, death is not necessarily an evil thing. So, but it definitely seems like it's skewed that way. So that's kind of my first problem as far as deities and domains go. Now I'm gonna talk about. Let me bring up the next edge, and then I'll talk about my other issue with Cleric is first. So the seasoned edge is the destroy undead. As an action, the Cleric can spend 2 power points, and in a medium blast template, basically every undead creature in that medium blast template centered on the Cleric makes a spirit roll or takes a wound. So okay, this makes sense. So now my main issue here, what they're trying to represent here is kind of the main Cleric thing, is the channeling energy, Carl, where Clerics channel energy, which was usually... so Clerics have a thing called harm or healing, and in Pathfinder, you either have a positive channel energy or negative channeling energy. Now, my main issue here is that you can have... They have evil deities and neutral deities, but the abilities only represent the good deities, or positive channeling energy, healing, and that destroy undead is really kind of wrapped up in channel energy, and like it should kind of be a part. Now, again, I don't want to get too much into like how I would fix this, but I don't think destroy undead is very good on its own at all. Like, it's so niche, as far as like it's too. But
that's the classic Cleric trope, right? Turn undead.
Well, in D&D, but not in Pathfinder. In Pathfinder, you can do kind of this big healing spell, and that also just damages. It's not turning undead. Turning undead would be you're making them afraid, they're running away. That's what kind of turning undead is. Channeling energy is so it's destroy undead is wrapped up into channeling energy in normal Pathfinder. Here they had to split it up because I guess they didn't want to make it too powerful. But my main issue here is that the evil Clerics aren't represented, but you have evil deities or neutral deities. Right. So it doesn't really make sense. So that's kind of, here we're kind of losing it. Maybe they'll add that in. But besides that, I mean, I would say Clerics are absolutely amazing at healing. I mean, Destroy Undead I don't think is a good edge at all, because like I said, it's very niche, Carl, right? Where, you're spending 2 power points to do this medium blast and do a wound. It's an opposed roll, but I mean, that's already kind of niche, that it's only against undead. And also, you could just have blast or something, which would do...
Yeah, I don't like the fact that it requires power points. It should just be a thing you can do.
But then, I mean, it's difficult to balance, but I almost wish that was just wrapped up into channel energy and they had something else there. But besides that, just we'll talk about the next 2 edges, but these edges are kind of within all the other spellcasters, but let's just talk about the base edge. So, all my other problems aside, Carl, with the way deities are, with the way that there's no negative stuff, I mean, holy crap, Clerics are the most amazing healers I've ever seen, right? I mean...
That's the whole point of their existence, isn't it?
I mean, not always, but I mean, healing at range, which is something that it's not, holy crap, and that you can do additional people. I mean, right there, right? Like, that's super powerful. So,
I mean, that's...
From a mechanical standpoint, yeah, I mean, if you wanted to be a healer, be a Cleric. But from a Pathfinder standpoint, it's a big no for me because of those reasons. Now, the next 2, favored powers. And so favored powers is so once per turn, the cleric can ignore up to 2 points of any penalties when casting healing smite or protection. And that's all it does. It doesn't give them that. It's just that's what it is. Let's circle back on that, Carl. And then the final edge is called Divine Mastery, where at heroic you gain access to the epic power modifiers. Now, favored powers and the mastery edges, all the other spellcasting classes besides Bard get those. So Divine Mastery, there's not much to say. It's a good edge. It unlocks the epic powers. Like, that's great. Favorite powers. So I'll tell you my issue. You can tell me whether you agree with me or not. I really wish, and I wish that across a lot of these, that instead of giving the 3 specific powers...
Bingo.
This is your problem? Before they gave the very 3 specific powers, I really wish that they either, for clerics and specifically, and I don't know why they didn't do this, is that, you know, in each of the domain things, in each of the domains, you could have had a favored power list there. And either make it, and this is what I feel like for all the other spellcasters had this too, is that make it that like either we get rid of healing and we just have the favored power. So it would be the favored power of your domain plus any other 2 powers that you want. You know, don't lock them into each 3.
Yeah.
Or for clerics, you could do healing, your favored power, and then any other 1 power. So that's personally what I would do. If I was running this game, I would just give each domain their own favorite power, and then do that. So I don't know. So Carl, overall, look, I've been talking a lot. What's your thoughts on Cleric?
No, you kind of hit it right on the head. I think that limit of healing, smite, protection is just limiting. And what's the whole point of having all these different domains if you can't have some flavor associated with them?
Yeah.
So,
and
but I mean, overall, the Cleric is, very impressive for what they can do, and for healing, for sure. Yeah, that's a big deal. And I mean, overall, favorite powers. I think I would
homebrew that. Yeah.
I'd homebrew that. Let people pick powers from within. Within reason. We'll do the talk. Game master to player talk and make sure it makes sense. But just smite, protection, healing. At veteran. And the other thing you got to keep in mind that this is a veteran edge.
Yep.
That's giving you this.
And it's good. I mean, ignoring those penalties is really good. And remember, we talked about this in the initial video where a cleric who's really good at healing, like, you ignore those penalties to healing. So doing something like shorting your powers, and ignoring those negatives, like, that's really good. That's really good. So, yeah, I don't like how they shoehorned it in there. That's definitely something that I would change. It's just make the domains even more flavorful, because right now they don't give that much. Yeah. And then let people pick, because you taking that at veteran. What if you don't have smite? What if you don't have protection? Like, you didn't choose to take those powers.
Yeah. What if you don't care,
it just kind of sucks. You really want that edge because it's cool. I get to ignore healing, but so yeah, that's my change in that, and we'll see that a lot going up. So overall, from a representative standpoint, I actually give clerics a 4. Because I don't think they represent...
Oh, really?
Now, favored powers and divine mastery, there's not really anything like that in Pathfinder. It's just kind of to represent, because we don't have automatic things. I think those do a good job of kind of showing that, you're getting better at your spellcasting, I guess. You're doing better with specific your specific type of spellcasting. That's what it's kind of representing. But there's no, exact equivalent in Pathfinder. This is just to kind of represent the as you get better with your spellcasting. So yeah, I give it a 4 as far as representing, because they just left out the negative channeling energy, and I don't, and the domains and deities thing. For mechanically, I would still give them, for heal, just because of how good they are at healing. I would almost give them an 8, just because they're so good at healing. What would your score be?
Yeah, I think from a classic cleric trope, it's strong, right? I mean, it's up there at an 8. But it's the classic clerics are healers. They're Mostly it looks like it's kind of the feel is you play somebody more good than evil because you got the destroy undead. It kind of meets those old school tropes for sure. So I don't know about matching Pathfinder, but as far as classic cleric, this is what a cleric does.
And just from mechanically, I would say for you think.
Yeah, mechanically.
You give it a
what? It's a good
8. Okay.
I'll give it an 8 as well. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
I don't give it a Pathfinder number.
Yeah. Let's move on to Druid. So Druids, they get the requirements are D6 in Spirit, D6 in Survival. So again, here we're kind of getting to a little bit of the weeds of like, well, what do we use for like knowledge about nature? It's not science, I guess. It's probably survival. But anyways, so they get their arcane background. They get faith is their skill. The interesting thing here is that Spirit is, which is faith based. They get 3 starting powers and they get 10 power points. Now, Druids use the Nature Cleric domain for their power list and also for their sins. So they also have sins. They have the Armor Interference of Light. Now, this is very interesting, Carl, because in Pathfinder, they actually have medium armor proficiency. So I guess they did this to kind of balance it out a little bit, but it doesn't quite fit. Because you also can't wear metal, but that doesn't, there's not really an issue as far as, I guess, studded leather. I don't know if that's even in here. So, I don't know. It's a little weird that they didn't get medium, but I guess that's to balance it out. They get the Nature Bond. Nature Bond is you get to choose. This is one of the first things where you kind of get to choose between 2 different things. Where attunes, they get a free reroll. Anytime she fails a faith roll to activate a spell. So not a free reroll on faith rolls, just whenever they fail, they get a free reroll. Or they can choose Beastmaster, where if they take the Beastmaster edge, her companion automatically starts as wild card. Now, just so you know, in Pathfinder, Carl, the Druids do get a choice of either they get to choose one of like 6 cleric domains. And domains in Pathfinder, which is something I didn't talk about in Cleric, is they actually get a specific power. They're just like domain powers, which they get. So you would kind of get one of those.
That if you're in that domain, you
get the power and stuff.
Just get it.
Or you can get a companion. So now, no, that you're not getting a companion with this, but you are getting the equivalent. You are getting basically an extra edge that starts as wildcard early. We'll talk about that later. They get Nature Sense, where survival is linked to spirits rather than smarts. They get to know the language of Druidic. Again, they get sin. They have the sins of the nature domain. Yep, and then they have Wilderness Stride, where things like it's weird that they say Druids pass through rough terrain such as dense forests, rocky hills, or desert sands with ease. They ignore movement penalties from difficult ground. Now, I would say here, which is weird that they kind of left out, is that it should be they ignore movement penalties for difficult ground in natural settings, because the flavor text before that is talking about that. The name of it's called Wilderness Stride, but if you were in an urban setting where there was like a messed up cobble street or ruins of something, I would say as a GM you wouldn't get this bonus. But they don't state that, so that's maybe a typo or something they left out, but I believe that's their intention. Holy crap. I mean, I don't know. Do you want to read through everything first before we give our impressions, or do you want to start talking about anything?
No. Let's go through everything, and then you can come back.
So, Wild Shape. The
Wild Shape is
the seasoned edge.
Yep.
They gain the Shape Change spell if they don't already have it. Duration is 1 hour versus the 5 rounds that it normally is. And you get to use shapes one level higher. So that's Wild Shape. Now we get into favored powers, Druid and Divine Mastery. Here again, Druids are restricted from favored powers from being Entangled, Smite, or Protection. So again, I kind of wish this was, just choose one and give the other 2 for free. It's something that me and Carl would do.
Same one,
and then Divine Mastery is great. Carl, I have to say, I absolutely loved it. I mean, I love Druids anyways. I think they did a tremendous job translating this over. It was kind of tricky. And I think Druids just seem amazing. They kind of have everything here.
They've got a lot of
this is so thematic. I think it's one of the most, besides Bard, this has to be the most thematic class. I mean, and just starting out, right? Oh, yeah. You just starting out, just the one class feat, you just feel like a Druid, right? You get all those spells. You get, the Attuned or the Beastmaster. And by the way, I love the Beastmaster thing. Choosing that and getting wild card immediately.
The wild card.
Getting the wild card, which normally would be, another edge. Like, So you'd have to take Beastmaster, but it's still giving you the equivalent of another edge much earlier than you'd get it. And then also getting stuff like, using survival, like we talked about, linked to spirit. So you don't have to have as much smarts. Which again, I'm kind of unclear here about using nature rolls, but yeah. And then wild shape. Oh my god. Oh my god. I love shape changing, but in normal Pathfinder, it's kind of crap. Oh my god. I mean, having an hour duration, right? And so if you had concentration to be 2 hours.
Hour is a big deal.
And getting it, this is amazing. I mean, favorite powers is not me and Carl's favorite. So that aside, I think they hit this out of the park. I love this. What do you think, Carl?
Oh, I think it's I haven't played a lot of druids, but I think this is basically, isn't this the whole point of the druid is wild shape?
No,
in a sense?
not specifically, but yeah, that is their that is one of the big things they have. The base druid is wild shape, and they get it at level 4.
And that's what people really love about it. That's what people really love about it. At least it seems like, in all the discussions I've read and things, that it's a big deal. So wild shape is huge. The hour length is a big deal.
It actually makes it like you're shape changing. It's not just like a super temporary power,
Well, it's not like just a combat thing anymore.
You can fly for utility.
It's something. Yeah. You can pass as that and use it for something else. It's got higher utility, than just combat, which is really cool. And then I think the Beastmaster coming as a wild card. The difference between not a wild card and a wild card is such a huge gap difference. The step change is really a big deal, and I think it's really, really cool.
Yeah, so. and they did a really good job transferring over. So like I said, they in Pathfinder you have the choice, just like you kind of do, but instead of the free reroll on faith rolls, you get to choose a domain and you get the domain powers, but obviously that's not how they did clerics. So I do like how it here that they just give you a reroll. I think both of these are really powerful options, and one's kind of like that. Do you want to kind of be more of a spellcaster, or do you want to have a beast companion and kind of more go on than that? So I do like that there's kind of 2 rows of druids here, because generally these class feats are, if 2 people have the class feats, you're kind of the same, but you could kind of have here. You could have 2 druids that just feel different just from that first edge.
They have different flavor to them.
I give this a 10 as far as the conversion, as far as representing druids. I think they did a really good job, and I'll give it actually just like a 9 mechanically, because not quite as good as a bard, but I think it does what it does, and it does it really well. The light armor is a little bit of an issue, because I think generally druids were kind of a little bit more combat-y, but here they really can't be. But compared to all the other spellcasters besides bard, and cleric, I guess. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, no, I think it's as good as except for the light armor. It's just as good as a bard.
Just different,
in my mind.
Very thematic.
Cool.
Cool. Moving on. Fighter requirements: Strength D6, Fighting D6. Here, I'm just going to read this whole thing through. Martial flexibility. Once per encounter, as a free action. Remember, an encounter is like a battle. A fighter can choose to gain the benefits of any single combat edge. You still must meet all the edge's requirements, and that ends when the encounter ends. That's what they get at novice level. Deadly Blow. The fighter adds +1 to the damage of all successful athletics, fighting, and shooting rolls. Their veteran edge is martial flexibility. Basically, instead of that 1 edge, they get to choose 2 edges every time. And their final one is martial prowess, where they get a free reroll on any failed fighting rolls. So, yeah, I
seems kind of ho-ho.
So as far as representing fighters, I kind of get, I don't know. I'm just going to say overall, this is a complete meh. This is just meh. This is just complete meh for me. Fighters get, so basically in 1E, they're braver, they get bonus feats. They're kind of flexible. This is almost like how in 2E, actually at level 9, they get something where they can kind of just choose any feat and retrain it easily. Every day they can prepare a different feat. It almost kind of feels like that. But they also get like bonuses to attacking and damaging, but that's from the very beginning. So I don't know. This is a little bit of a meh as far as representing.
I think it would have been cooler if they would have, because all the combat edges in the book are really where a fighter strives and drives towards. It would have been kind of cooler if the martial flexibility, or whatever you want to call it, was really related to the cost of edges. So a fighter, it costs less somehow, and I don't know.
Maybe they're
exactly
always one rank,
less
considered one rank
to get
higher.
a combat. Yeah, something like that. One rank higher, or one die type lower, or something. As far as the requirements are, something would have been much cooler, I think, than just, hey, you can pick one.
Yeah,
in an encounter.
I mean, I don't think. Okay, we'll say I don't think Deadly Blow is that good. It just really isn't. It's really not worth taking, in my opinion. I mean, +1 damage. I mean, I don't know, right? I mean, I don't think +1 damage is just not that good in Savage Worlds.
Yeah, maybe plus. Why did they give him a +2
I mean,
damage?
I understand they didn't want
least,
to,
right? I mean,
they didn't want to kind of go on the footsteps of barbarians. Here, I really wish they kind of dug into more 2e and just made them more accurate. Which I know that's what martial prowess is, but they could have just given here you have the trademark weapon edge, but you can do it on any just give them a +1 to rolls. I think to fighting rolls. That's what I would change it to, honestly, because I just don't think +1 to damage is just not good. Yeah, as you said, this is just really boring. This is very generic. This is very boring. I would say that if you're making a character and they kind of are martial based, but you just don't have any really good, you kind of don't want a barbarian, you kind of don't want a ranger or paladin or something, or what, if you don't really know what to do, then this is better than nothing. You're getting a free edge that you can change. That's good. But Carl, almost to your point,
as long as you match the requirements.
It's just that it's just not I'd almost give them you're also considered one level higher for I'd almost even throw that in there here, honestly. It's not bad. There's no drawbacks of being a fighter, but no. It's just so very generic. I mean,
it's just not as cool as everything. We've shown a bunch of really cool classes with some really interesting things with flavor, and then the fighter doesn't. I mean, you can tell just by reading him, right? He's got one thing: martial flexibility, and okay.
I mean, I get what they were going for, because there's not really any drawbacks in the game to being a fighter, so I don't really know what they would have done as far as drawbacks. They pretty much just have fighters just have positives, but they're just, some of them are just not that great. I mean, they get those bonus feats, so I get that it was kind of a hard spot to put them in. I just wish that some of the stuff, like you said, done something a little bit more interesting with that martial flexibility, whatever. And then Deadly Blow is different. Okay, martial prowess, that's really good, but that's not until heroic. So,
yeah, it's so high. I mean, how many? I noticed this in a few. How many campaigns reach heroic?
But
I don't know. It feels like that's kind of high for the requirements.
Let me cut in real quick, Carl. Just remember, this is primarily built. We'll talk about this. This is primarily built to run the adventure paths for Pathfinder. That's why I believe I listened to Shane, an interview with Shane, and he did say that he loves the adventure paths and he wanted to play them with Savage Worlds. Now, adventure paths in Pathfinder go from level 1 to 20, and some of them do epic levels too. So I believe all the adventure paths that you'd be running with this would be going from... But
you still need your players to be able to handle playing a campaign.
Yeah, but I think the intention is to get up to Legendary Plus. So I would say that, but to your other one, once you get up to Heroic, it is it is too long of a time to wait until you're more accurate. And that's kind of, in 1E and in 2E, that's kind of the fighter's main thing, is that they're more accurate. I would say from representing it, this is a 5, and from a mechanical standpoint, this is a 5-6. This is just complete middle ground. This is just completely boring.
Yeah.
It's a 5.
It's a 5.
Let's move on to Monk. Monk. Boy. Okay. I'm just going to say that I got some issues with Monk, man, but and I love monks, but...
Just say it. Monk. Well, you love monks as a concept, but do you love this monk?
We'll talk about it. So, agility of a D6, spirit of a D6, and a fighting of a D6. These have actually the most requirements out of any. So, monks have the armor restriction of cloth, meaning they have the same as spellcasters. They can't wear any armor, which fits monks. But hold on, Carl. We'll dive into everything. Stunning Fist.
I'm holding on.
When a monk hits a target with an unarmed strike and scores a raise, he may make the foe distracted or vulnerable. This occurs even if they take no damage or soak it. Okay. Unarmed Strike. The monks cause strength D4 damage with their hands, and this stacks with stuff like brawlers or claws, whatever. And they're always considered armed. Okay. I almost want to just run through everything. Or we can actually talk about this first. Up to you. Okay.
No, run through everything. And
okay, so next we'll talk about Mystic Powers. Now I'm going to take a second to talk about Mystic Powers because this is what they kind of did with the half-casters, which are basically monks, paladins, and rangers, which these were classes that, you know, have some mystical abilities that were not full casters. This is kind of how they treated it. So those other three classes have the same thing where they are given access to a couple of different, either I think it's like 3 or 4 powers. And 5 dedicated power points, but they don't have you don't have an arcane skill. The big thing about this is that you automatically activate it with the regular costs, or you can spend an extra power point and get the raise effect. But they only have so for monk they only have the self only limit. So basically they get boost trait, agility, athletics, fighting, and stealth only, deflection, smite, and speed, and they can only cast it on themselves. So I do think this is cool, but this is like ki or chi. This is what it's representing. And with all of these kind of blank powers, all these mystic, they're not called mystic powers, but they're, maybe they are actually. Let me look real quick. They're all mystic powers. So sorry, it's just like how all the other casters had that, had those edges that were across the board. It's Mystic Powers Monk. You can't take any other edges to affect this, so you can never increase these edges. You can never increase the power points of these with anything. You can't take any edges to anything. So basically, they're just, you have 5 points that they recover normally. You can still spend a Benny to recover power points in it, but that's what they do. Great Key, you gain extra powers to your Mystic Powers, and then Wholeness of Body. Once per day for 10 minutes, you can make a natural healing roll. And it's within the golden hour. Okay. So that was everything. Let's go through this. Okay. So Armor Restriction Cloth. That fits Pathfinder. Here's the issue, though, Carl, is that in Pathfinder, monks are actually super tanky. Because, dexterity is what AC is calculated with. Also, monks get a bonus to their AC with wisdom. They don't have this here. So you have a melee-only class, pretty much, that just is going to have the worst armor class, or, toughness.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they don't have a parry bonus. Of some
exactly. Type. They have no parry bonus. There's nothing here to emulate that from Pathfinder. And nothing here to balance it out. Now, Unarmed Strike, also I have an issue with, it gives you that strength D4, but, and you're always considered armed, blah, blah, blah. But, it doesn't give you anything else. And in Pathfinder, the monks have stuff where it's considered magical at a certain level. It's considered like cold iron. It's to get around immunities. There's nothing in here at all, not even the other edges for monks, or anything in the normal game that can ever give you that. So monks are pretty much screwed. I don't know how they're going to handle that as far as the bestiary. We don't have the bestiary, but I'm going under the assumption that, that some creatures are going to have, I don't remember if we have to look at the gear, but maybe you can look at this while I'm talking about it. Special materials. So there is special materials like adamantine, darkwood, mithril, silver, and alchemicals. They have silver. So I'm assuming there is going to be creatures like Fae and Fiends that have weaknesses to that, or that, you need a magic weapon, but they're not giving monk anything here to overcome that. And, I will say that Stunning Fist is amazing. Stunning Fist is really good. Having something that just happens automatically that you don't have to spend any resources on is really good. So we'll get that. Stunning Fist is the best part of this, but Armor Restriction Cloth without any type of toughness bonus or parry bonus, like you said, which I don't think this equals with the other ones. Here's one of the ones that, same with Fighter, that just doesn't mechanically equal. And Mystic powers, great. I like the mystic power system, but having the great key just giving extra powers is not enough for an edge, because you're always limited by those 5 power points. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it gives enough for an edge. Yeah. And then wholeness about the heroic edge, Carl, is at heroic level, once per day, you have to spend 10 minutes and you can make one single natural healing roll. And it still has to be within the golden hour. At heroic. Even if you have to spend 10 minutes, so that 10 minutes could push you over the golden hour. And you can make one natural, this is the game where there's a cleric that's just healing coming out of his butthole. You know what I mean? There's magical potions.
Everybody at range.
Those two, those two edges are just not good. And even if you wanted to take this for Stunning Fist, that armor restriction cloth is such a debuff because it doesn't give you any bonuses. And being a melee character, and then Unarmed Strike doesn't give you that much that, it gives you a strength D4. But I don't know, Carl. I mean, do you...
Well, I mean, when people are carrying around swords that are strength D6, I mean, there's got to be some benefit to being unarmed. That this monk, and this is where things like ignoring,
having all that on
or
you,
whatever, being able to, it would work. But this is like really, of course, monks kind of sucked in early D&D too.
Yeah, I've never played a monk in 1E.
There's not much.
I've never played a monk in 1E. I have played a monk in. I have played a monk in 2nd edition, and they're amazing. So yeah, I think this is just really bad as far as representing Pathfinder and mechanically. I mean, well, how would you fix this?
It's not a usable class.
Yeah, I almost think that, if you wanted to be an unarmed person, and I don't believe that the chi edge is in here anymore. It's not. Or the key edge, sorry. That's one from normal Savage Worlds that they just took out. Which gave you something kind of different. I don't know why they didn't keep that in there. I guess because Mystic Powers. Now, Mystic Powers is good. Having something you can automatically throw on, and they have some kind of the best powers. I mean, remember your Cyberpunk game when I was kind of a Cyberpunk monk? I was like a cyber monk, basically, and having speed and deflection. So there is there is some defensive stuff in the deflection power, but it just, I don't know, man. At the very least, if somebody wanted to play this, I would say I would give them okay, well, your strikes are considered magical, and then at seasoned, and at you gain your choice of either silver or adamantine or cold iron, and then I would give them that unarmed strike would automatically get some bonuses, and then I might even increase it again, the die. I don't know.
And I would think unarmed strike the bonus die should increase over
That's what
time.
I was saying, yeah, which is something that the Pathfinder ones get. So I definitely think you'd have to homebrew this. And then, the flurry of blows, that's not represented here. Give Unarmed Strike, a rate of fire. Give it rate of fire 2 or something. I don't know. Give it, basically a free, what's it called? What's the edge with hitting 2 at once or whatever? Frenzy.
No.
Yeah, Frenzy. Give it Frenzy. I don't know. So, yeah, I give Monk a 3 representing and a 2, another 3 mechanically. It just the benefits do not outweigh the drawbacks, in my opinion.
I can't see somebody picking it. That's the I mean, if you want to do this, I guess, and it's really about the theme of it. But I mean, I can't see anybody really.
I could see Stunning Fist is cool, and having those Mystic Powers is cool. I just don't think the rest of the edges give you much.
So make that an edge.
But just that you would just the armor. It would just be sucked to have a melee character, and then you would just be hit so much.
Yeah, fix the armor, add parry or something like that to make up for not having armor or toughness or whatever. So, I think there's some things you could do, but on the face, it's not something that I would see somebody being really excited to play.
So, what do you give it on the score from 1 to 10?
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
3.
Yeah.
2.
Yeah. It's definitely my least favorite one that they did, and it definitely seems they would. I definitely believe that they have to fix it. It's just really not, just across the board, not a good implementation. All right, moving on to Paladin. Paladin requirement:
Paladin.
Strength of D6, Spirit of D6, and the against vow minor to serve the deity or order. So paladins are not necessarily a holy warrior. They can also be they can also have a special order they belong to. So they get the aura of courage within 10 inches, +1 to fear test. It's all allies, so not them, which is kind of funny. They get the code of honor hindrance, which you can't. It's the code of honor and hindrance. They can detect evil as an action, where they can kind of ping if something's evil or not. And then they get the smite evil action, which is the free action. They can choose an enemy. If the enemy is evil, this goes into why alignment's important. They get a free reroll on any failed athletics, fighting, or shooting rolls, and they can use this ability once per rank per encounter. This is kind of the only ability we've seen that grows per rank. Let's just run through these. They get the mystic powers things for boosting trait, healing, relief, and smite.
That's
just like the monk.
Yeah.
Mercy, they get as an action, paladins can grant mercy to any character within range equal to their spirit, which means they can automatically just get rid of distracted, vulnerable, or shaken. And then they get mount. At heroic level, they get a creature that's a mount that can
heroic level.
So, oh boy, this is a weird class. It's a little bit mix. So as far as Pathfinder, Carl, Smite Evil is really good. I do think they did a good job with Smite Evil. It actually might be better than the Pathfinder equivalent. They kind of got rid of lay on hands. There's no kind of healing here except for the divine powers, I guess. That's kind of what it was representing. Here's the main issue is that, you called it out, Carl. The mount at heroic level. Like, somebody who is investing on wanting to be a mounted fighter... Why would you have to wait for heroic level to get that? That is just really bad, in my opinion, that you'd have to this kind of character-defining feature, wait to heroic level, that then gains advances. It gains advances when you gain traits, but you're only doing that from heroic. So in Pathfinder, they actually get the choice... I believe, of choosing. Let me get to it. So they have spellcasting. So this is what I wish they did. I almost wish I understand they kind of had to move stuff around here, but almost give Mystic get rid of maybe the detect evil or I'm not sure here, but maybe at veteran level or at season level, and maybe push season down, kind of rearrange stuff, or maybe they just choose between spellcasting. So basically gave them a choice, like the Druids got. Gave them a choice of their Divine Bond. So it's something that the Pathfinder gets at 5th level, where they can choose to have a mount, or they can choose to basically have something where their weapon is really good. Here's where I wish they did the same thing, where they easily could have done this too, is, have your choice of maybe at season level, have the mystic powers, have that mount ability, or have your choice of imbuing a weapon with pluses that you can use to spend on in the crafting section, in the magic section. There's weapons that can have special traits that you can spend those points on magic traits. That's what they did in Pathfinder, and I kind of wish that's how I would homebrew it, because like you said, getting mount at season level, at heroic level, is just bad. So I don't know. What is your thoughts on it overall?
I think heroic is too high of a requirement for a mount, because again, paladins are defined by mount, by laying on hands, by a few things, by again they're a holy order of knights, and so like you said, a special weapon would also be part of that. I think the problem is, if we read through this book, there's only one class edge per level that you can get, and the paladin feels like at season there should be this branching path that you could take. Well, or maybe not a branching path, but different things that you might pick at season to kind of give yourself that flavor.
We saw with Druid that they had one of the things be a choice. So I'm agree with you. I wish they did either at seasons. I see how they did it, they were kind of in a bind here. Well, do we give them a healing ability? Would that cut into... So within their mystic powers, they have healing. So it is an automatic heal, which is good, right? I mean, they have an automatic heal power. They also have automatic relief. So, I mean, overall, it's just kind of a mix. I think the mount is the biggest problem that we have, is that... Or maybe even just at veteran level, give them an option or something. I do think the mount at heroic is just too high. So I don't know how... I'm not going to spend too much more time on how I would grok this, you know? You aura of another issue that we have is that like there's already like the champion edge. There's already like some of these edges that kind of do what the class already was kind of does. That's already in Savage Worlds as being something that you could take. So I really think Smite Evil is really good. Like again, but paladins are kind of niche in the way of like they're really good against evil characters, but they have a lot of stuff going on here. So I would say representing it, I would say like a 6. I would say like mechanically, I give them a 7 because while mount is kind of an out for me, they do kind of do what they do. I mean, the mystic powers that they have are good. The mercy is good. I mean, they're very much like a, against an evil thing, they're a good fighter, and they have some support abilities, right? So I don't know. What's your
At least they're more interesting.
Oh,
than
yes.
I mean,
they are much more thematic, and they have to have that code of honor. Okay, well, we're running late, but let's keep going. We have 4 more classes. Ranger. Shooting of a D6, survival of a D6 is the requirement. They have armor restrictions of medium. That's great. That's pretty... Now, they get their favorite enemy and favorite terrain. So favorite enemy is you choose one of the enemy types. You get a free reroll when failing to track or attack that type of being. So if you fail one of those rolls, again, it's not, there's rerolls where you can just have a free reroll, but this is specifically when you fail one against your specific type. Favorite terrain, you choose one of those terrain types, like forest, plains, urban, swamp. During initiative, you draw an additional action card. And then Wilderness Stride, Rangers pass through rough terrain such as dense forests, rocky hills, or desert sands. They ignore movement penalties for difficult ground. It's kind of the same as the Druid. This is kind of very thematic as far as, I don't know, do we want to read through this all first? Or, let's read through it all, right? Okay,
well,
so
we got to kind of speed it up.
The Seasoned Edge is Quarry. They can choose an additional enemy and terrain type for your favorite enemy and favorite terrain. So you get more of those. Now, the interesting thing with this is that you can take this once per rank. So you can actually take this again at Veteran and again at Heroic. At Heroic Veteran level, they get Mystic Powers of Beast Friend, Boost Trait, Entangle, Warrior's Gift, where Boost Trait and Warrior's Gift are self-only. So just similar to ones we've seen, just more of that nature-y theme. And then at Heroic level, they get Master Hunter, where they do an extra D6 of damage against their favorite enemy. So, Carl, this is very thematic as far as Pathfinder 1e. Mm-hmm. Now, I think people have had a lot of issues with Rangers in Pathfinder 1e and D&D. That they are so, like, this can either be really good or it can be really bad, depending on, what you're playing in. If you're playing an all urban game, if you're playing a city entry game, not necessarily, because then okay, I'll choose urban as my favorite terrain, and I'll choose humanoids as my favorite enemy.
And that was part of.
I believe so. I haven't looked it over
as well.
So in 2e, which is what a lot of people have issues with Rangers in 1e and within D&D 5e. They're actually looked at as kind of the weakest classes. Where in 2e, these were the favored enemies and the favored terrains were kind of optional feats that you could take. The Rangers get other stuff where they can just designate anybody, and just one person is what so they really kind of fixed Rangers. So I almost wish they went with that. I still like them here. I think they did some cool they're very flavorful. I mean, they are, you definitely feel like that Ranger where you have these specific things. So thematically they're on point, but mechanically, they're like, right, they're definitely like, I mean, if you take Quarry a bunch of times, I could see it. I like the favorite terrain that they came up with, getting that additional action card kind of like on top of level-headed or whatever. I think that's cool. Mm-hmm. And the free reroll on the enemy. But this is so which is the problem with all the other 1E and 5E, is that this is so campaign dependent. This is so, like, if you don't choose the right ones, you're screwed.
Right.
If you choose the right ones, you're really strong. So, I don't know. This is almost hard to judge. Yeah, sorry, you go on. I'm talking too much.
Well, so the expectation is for this one, some of the other classes, they're rounded no matter what kind of campaign. But for this one, you have to have that conversation. And, is this more of an urban campaign? Is this more of wilderness? Is it, hex crawl? What is it this campaign's going to be, so that the ranger can pick those favorite terrain, favorite enemy, because if they pick a favorite enemy which they never encounter, then that's another problem. So to really get something out of this, and I think this goes back to you saying it's either really good or it's really bad. To get something out of it, you really have to have a conversation on what the campaign's going to be like well before the campaign starts, and then you got to stick to it. That session 0 kind of conversation as a game master.
Yeah.
You got to really think about what this player wants, and it kind of limits.
So the only thing here that's kind of universal is the mystic powers and the wilderness stride. So, I still think Ranger would be cool to take. Sure. Again, it's more interesting than a fighter. Like, if I was just going to do a martial thing, I'd almost just take this. And, you get these bonuses. It's more interesting than a fighter to me. And then, maybe I might skip Quarry and then just take the mystic powers. So, again, it's more interesting than a fighter. Not better, necessarily, but more interesting. So, yeah, as far as a Pathfinder 1E representation, they get like an 8 or a 9. It is representing the way Rangers are in that game. But mechanically, it's hard to rate. So I'd almost give it like a 6 or 7, just because it's like, as we talked about, it could either be amazing or it could be really bad. Let's move on. Oh boy, Carl, here's another one. Yep. Okay, Rogue. Agility D6, Thievery of D6 requirements. Makes sense. Armor restriction of light, sneak attack. Rogues get an additional D6 to their damage when they have the drop on their victim or the victim is vulnerable. This applies to athletics, throwing, fighting, or shooting attacks. Let's just move through these. Trap Sense. At Seasoned, basically they get a free notice roll anytime a detectable trap is about to be strung within 5 inches of themselves. They have line of sight to the trap and can't be shaken or stunned. So they have to have line of sight and they cannot be shaken. It works generally like Danger Sense, but it only applies to traps. Yeah.
Have their full faculty. They gotta have their full
if the trap is detected, they're able to be evaded. And anyone they warn gets 2 points of evasion penalties to do so. So they can also evade, but they have 2 points of evasion penalties. If the trap normally can be evaded, anybody warned can evade at the usual -2 penalty. Let me read that. If the trap is detected and may be evaded, the rogue and anyone she warns ignores 2 points of evasion. Oh, I get it. Okay, yeah. So if it's detected, they get to ignore it. If the trap can't normally be invaded, they still get to do it, but that normal -2. Disarming traps. Rogues with Trap Sense ignore up to 2 points of thievery penalties when attempting to disarm traps. Veteran, Uncanny Reflexes. This is something that I think Barbarian should have gotten. The rogues have an uncanny ability to avoid area attacks and effects. She ignores the usual -2 agility penalties when making evasion attempts. So, again, better off on doing evasion. Evasion attempts against area effect attacks or effects that don't usually allow it, usually at the -2 penalties, such as Burst or Blast, or even Confusion or similar spells cast with the area effect modifier. Did I read that correctly? That might have been kind of jumble to people.
Evasion attempt against area effects that don't usually allow it. So you're allowed to
you ignore the -2 and you get normal ones against it.
Don't.
Yeah.
Or you do... Right, or if it's normally not evadable, you can evade it.
It's basically the same as the trap thing, but it's against like all powers and effects now. It's any area effects, area effective attack or effects. Right. Okay. And then they get Opportunist, where when a target withdraws from melee, they get a free attack, even if the foe has extraction or improved extraction. If the foe doesn't have either of those edges, he counts as vulnerable. Okay. Oh boy. Carl, let's just talk about the beginning thing. This is the worst. Almost this is like monk level here for me. They have armor restriction of light, right? So I almost considered armor restriction. Yep. It's like a point each. So armor restriction light would be like a -2, right? So medium would be -1, light would be -2, and we'll say cloth is -3. Just as far as balancing, they had to give these point values. Okay. And then sneak attack.
Okay, sure.
You get an extra d6 damage when you have the drop or they're vulnerable. Now, is that even equal in edge? Okay, let's say it was. That means their net... So let's say it is equal 2 points, right? It's equal in edge. That means their net gain there is 0. Like, fighters have no drawbacks, get a free edge. Okay? Rogues... No,
Yeah,
I mean, rogues
there's not much
mechanically
here.
just are not balanced as well. Like, and representationally wise, if we look at the rogues in 1E, they get... these are just not good. I'm very surprised that the rogues are not giving more. Like, at first level, they get trap finding. They get extra talents. They get more skills. So, I don't know.
Why don't they have benefits to things like thievery or other skills that seem to be appropriate?
Here I would almost
I mean, even like persuasion or something that's aligned with something.
I mean, just from a points perspective, if we just compare a rogue to a fighter, they're just not equal, right? Like they're just not. I mean, you can't make the case that they are. Now, the only thing that I'll say as far as sneak attack is that looking ahead, and we'll talk about this in the next video, that there's two cool prestige edges, prestige edges that have to use sneak attack to unlock. So I don't know how much of a benefit. That's not really a benefit if you don't take them, right? So my goal to fix this is either just give them trap sense right away, and then give them something else, or just give them like +2 skill points or something to represent them being more skilled, or give them something like a fighter where every
Something
morning
like
they have like
the
these flexible skills every morning where they can like have 2 skill points basically, like every morning they can decide where those go, something like that,
I absolutely think trap sense
Main
should be
kit.
part of their core. Their
So
core
just if
build
you
out, and then that would give them something. That would give them something there that's very unique and very valuable overall to the party. Like everyone else has something super valuable.
Yeah,
to the party.
I mean, either give them extra skill points or just kind of move everything down. Like give trap sense right away, give uncanny reflex at seasons, maybe do opportunist, which I don't think is that good really, at veteran, and give something else at legendary. So
give them a bonus on stealth. Give them a bonus on something.
yeah,
it's
So rogues to me, as far as representation, I mean they have sneak attack, I guess, but that's it. So I give them maybe a 7, but mechanically they have like they're like monk level to me. They're like a 3, just because they just are not mechanically balanced. So what are your thoughts?
I'd give them just overall.
Okay.
I'd give them a 4. It's just, I don't know. There's a lot. To be desired
2 more classes. We're almost done. We're running
Sorcerer.
almost 2 hours, but let's get this done. Sorcerers. Smarts of a D6, spirit of a D6. Very strange here why they required you to have a smarts of a D6. I'm not sure why, Carl, but we'll talk about that. So they get the arcane background. Their difference is that they have, it's spellcasting. They start with 15 power points, but they only get 2 starting powers. But their spellcasting is linked to spirit rather than smarts. So that's kind of a bonus, I guess. But remember that all powers have smarts as their range. So that's kind of a, wish-wash there, which I always kind of have a problem with
I don't know.
in Savage Worlds generally, but whatever. They get a huge available power list. So very similar to the Wizard power list. With a lot of, we didn't really talk about the power list that much, but like Cleric, Druid, and Bard had much more restricted. Sorcerers just have a huge power list, which we'll talk about it, but armor interference of cloth, and then they get a bloodline. So we'll have to talk about bloodlines, but bloodlines are kind of what they're, because sorcerers are all about like a certain type of eldritch creature or something in their, all their magic comes from their inherent abilities, their blood. So we'll talk about the bloodlines afterwards. Let's just run through it because it's pretty simple. They get favored powers, as we talked about. Now here again, Carl, this is even weird. This is the weirdest one of all of them. They have Bolt, Deflection, and Dispel. But there's bloodlines. There's bloodlines,
Maybe those
right,
aren't
Carl?
my favorite powers.
give the blood give each bloodline a favorite power, and then let them choose any 2 powers again. With the
so it's
Cleric.
kind of like the same thing we said negative against.
And
the
they have
Cleric.
bloodlines there, so that's how I would do it. Arcane
thing.
Mastery. So this is interesting. They actually get Arcane Mastery at Veteran. Remember, the Mastery edges give access to the epic powers. So they actually get epic powers earlier, and then their final one is they get it's called Advanced Bloodline, where they get an additional ability. So before we talk about the bloodlines, I'll say this is the great representation of sorcerers. This is, it wasn't that hard, but it's more about the bloodlines. So crap, let's run through the bloodlines.
All right. Well, we don't have to run.
I think we'll split the video. I think we'll have to split the video at the class edges, right? Okay. Up to you. We don't have to run through them, but
for sure.
So each of the bloodlines.
No. Give a flavor.
So
for
there's
each.
stuff like a Baron, which is like a Cthulhu kind of thing. They get increases the toughness. But certain spells like Bolt Blast and Burst have lingering damage, but only cost 1 point instead of 2. Then they get increased reach for stuff like spells range. Their advanced form is, there's a lot to go over here, is never to be surprised and is immune to the drop unless bound. And they get more toughness, so very thematic. I don't know, do you really want to run all the way through these? Okay. So I'll just say what there is.
I don't think so. Yeah. So, Abysmal is their...
Abyssal is demonic. Abyssal is demonic
they
linked.
Have resistance.
Arcane is basically a powerful wizard in their past. Celestial is some type of angel or divine bloodline. Destined is just whatever. And that's kind of the most boring of all of them. You just get extra bennies. Draconic, you have dragon. Elementals, you have one of the elemental plane, like a Jinn or a genie, some type of genie, basically, or maybe like an elemental, like a powerful elemental or something. And each of those, I love the elemental because you have each of those have their own. Fae, that's a Sylvan thing. Infernal is a devil, and then undead is undead. So again, we're not listing them all up, but I think they're so cool. They're so varied. They're so flavorful, right? I mean, if you read them through,
oh yeah. The Sorcerer's got the most ability to make it your own and get a feel that's just what you're trying to
the bloodlines give a lot of a lot of diversity. Some of them are pretty boring, like Destined. The Arcane actually gives the same thing as the Wizard, which we'll talk about as with the Wizard. So thematically they hit it out of the park with the Sorcerer. I give it a 9, and I think as far as mechanically they're great. I give it another 9. I think I love this. I love Sorcerers anyways, and I think these looks really fun. The only problem for us is still the favored powers. Why not give each bloodline their own power?
Yeah.
And then what is your rating?
Oh, I
cool.
Easily a 9. But then I love Sorcerers too. I think they're really cool. Even when I learned Pathfinder 2 and you were teaching me what I picked, I picked the Sorcerer. Okay,
moving on to Wizards. Cool. So Wizards have a Smarts of D6 and Academics. Interesting academics here of D6. I would really think a cult would be, and I don't know. That's I don't know. I would almost house rule that as a cult of a D6. So
I think it's a
strange requirement. Anyway, so they get the arcane background. Spellcasting, same with, they're going to be similar to Sorcerer. They gain 10 power points, start with 3 power points. They get a huge power list. They get the Arcane Bond, so we'll talk about that right now. The Arcane Bond it's kind of like similar to the Druid where they could choose. They either get the Bonded Object, which is a type of object like a ring, a wand, and it gives +1 to spellcasting totals. Just all spellcasting totals. Now, if it's lost or destroyed, they can replace it with 500 gold pieces. So there is, there's a physical cost. And that's kind of a wizard thing. Or they can get a familiar. Let's talk about the familiar right now. So familiars are a small size 2 or -2 or -3 creature. They're totally independent. They're a wild card with respects to wounds and wild dies. They don't get bennies, but the mage can already spend them on his own behalf. So this is like a beast companion, but you already get the other edges where you can spend bennies on them. Here's some other cool stuff they get. So they already have all that other stuff.
Right.
They can understand the master's speech. They get their own 5 power points. They can actually cast spells, but the mage can use them. So the mage basically just gets 5 extra power points. They recharge at the same rate. If the familiar dies, the hero gets stunned. So this is the drawback. And after 10 days, they can get a new one. So this is the drawback, that the familiar is very weak and can die. They do not advance. They don't advance, but every of the master's rank, including novice, you get to choose one of 3 abilities. One of them is that you get to this like you can use your set. You can look or hear through them. But that's only like once. But then the other 2 is you can increase one of their traits, one die type, or it can gain an edge. So basically, every one of your rank, the familiar gets stronger. Wow. Let's just run through the wizards though. Totally. So that's what those 2 do. You either get that bond of a +1, or you get a familiar. They have the armor interference of cloth, like we've talked about. They get to choose a school, which we'll talk about. Let me go through the rest of stuff, then we'll talk about schools. So they choose a school, and then they have a spell book. And then we'll talk about those now. So schools are an interesting thing. You can either choose to be a universalist, which is you have nothing, you just everything's fine. Or you can choose to choose a school, which is you designate one of the types of schools. And they have, abjuration, conjuration, divination, enchantment, evocation, illusion, necromancy, and transmutation as one of your favorite schools. And then you get to choose 2 other ones, any 2, as opposition schools. Now, each of the schools, it lists what powers are considered to be in school, so there's no confusion there. When your favorite school, you get a free reroll when casting spells. Not failed, so this is different from a lot of the other free rerolls, is... you just get a free reroll. Yeah.
You can go for a raise.
Yeah, that's it. But spells cast from your opposition school cost an extra power point and have a -2 to their spell casting. So just heavily penalized. Now, spell books are where all your spells are kept. You can only carry 1 at a time. The issue with them is that if it's lost, it takes a week and 500 gold pieces to create again. So again, there's like this physical thing. If you find a new one, when a wizard finds a new spellbook or scroll, the spell it contains becomes available to choose as the wizard for the next chooses a new power's edge. Which I don't really get here, Carl. Here's where the bonus is, though. Wherever a wizard taking the new power edge can learn a 3rd new power if all the new powers are learned from scrolls and spellbooks. What that means is that I do like, this is an interesting thing that they did here to represent like how wizard spellcasting works in Pathfinder, is that if you've collected a bunch of scrolls, and then you're like, okay, I'm ready to take the new power edge, and the powers that you want to take, you have as scrolls, you get to learn 3 new powers instead of 2. So I think this was probably one of the most clever things they've done in it.
Well, this goes back to the old concept of when I'm learning, I can learn new spells by copying them from a scroll into my spell book. Here it's saying because you're doing that, it's easier.
You get more known.
And so when you go for that, you get kind of an extra... You can learn another one because you've already collected
It's a very interesting way that they came up with it. Now, the other edges we didn't even talk about. The seasoned edge to get favored powers. Again, I would just, do it per the school. Universalist gets one. I mean, it's there. It's right in front of your face. Now, again,
universal input on the system is make it based
not
on
just
something
these 3
else,
powers: arcane, protection, deflection, and dispel. Like, you know why that sucks so much is that like I'm pretty sure that if we go up to the schools, that it's arcane protection, what is it? Arcane protection, deflection, and dispel, right? I believe that arcane protection, dispel, and what's the other one? Deflection. Oh yeah, those are all abjuration spells, Carl. So if you're an aberration one, great. Yeah. But if you took that as one of your opposition spells as schools, then that becomes a almost useless thing. Like It's even this is the worst. This is the worst one, just because that those 3 are all in one school. I don't understand. I really, maybe they'll change this, but I just really don't understand why they would do that. Like have all 3 powers be from the same school. That just doesn't make any sense. The way I'm totally at a loss, right? Like, anyways, moving on. Veteran, they get the Arcane Mastery. Okay. So just like the Sorcerer, 1 early. And then finally, I think this is one of your favorite edges, right, Carl? Is the Eldritch Inspiration, where if you have a spellbooks on him, the wizard can spend a penny to cast any power of his rank or lower, just like normally. So basically this gives the wizard just like, they can spend a penny and just get access to a power they don't already have. So that's really cool. Definitely.
It's pretty cool. And that's the kind of thing that belongs at heroic. See, that's a heroic kind of thing versus some of the other ones we ran into where it's just like, why is it heroic and not earlier? That's a heroic kind of thing. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I think barring Arcane Mastery, which I think is the favored powers here, which is the worst case it's been, and out of all of them, I think they actually did a really, really, really good job making a wizard feel like a wizard. I mean, more so than I've ever seen in Savage Worlds, right? Like, and then making sorcerer and wizards really have, they really feel like they have a difference. Now the sorcerer, interesting, Carl, is that a sorcerer can take the arcane bloodline and actually get an arcane bond, so they can actually get the bonded object of familiar. And if a wizard took universalist, they'd almost feel like sorcerer and wizard would almost feel exactly the same. Just the sorcerer has extra power points compared to the wizard having one more, and having the spell book. So still kind of a difference, but the Arcane Bond is amazing. I love almost more than the Druid. Like, familiars are amazing, right? I mean, not only you're getting 5 extra power points, you're also getting a thing that grows that can scout. I mean, the utility there is amazing. Having a little owl or something that's flying around and you can look through, is crazy. I mean, it's such a cool ability. And if you didn't want that, you just have +1 to spellcasting rolls. You're just really good at spellcasting. I think this is the wizard I would actually play. I've never played a wizard in any game. I mean, I played a wizard. I played a Gish wizard in a PvP D&D game once, but this seems like a really fun wizard to play. I actually really like it. So.
Oh yeah, it's got a lot of flavor. It's got a lot of coolness to you. You can really customize
to how you feel
to how you feel about things. Yeah, it's really got a lot of flavor you can add.
I give it a 9 as far as transferring it over. I'm actually going to give it a little bit lower than a sorcerer mechanically. Honestly, only because the arcane, the favored powers is just so bad here because of the school system. That I almost give it I think I gave sorcerer a 9. I almost give a wizard here an 8 just because of that. You don't have to take favored powers, but it sucks that unless you're a abjuration wizard, you wouldn't want to take it, So, I don't know. That we would homebrew it.
I think we've already decided that we're gonna, if we play this, we'll home rule it.
Oh right. You're rating?
House rule this one. I think it's easy a 9. I mean, it's not quite as cool as Sorcerer, in my mind, but I love Sorcerers, so they're right there, head on, right next to each other. But it's interesting that all the spellcasters are like that. They're all interesting,
and I think they generally did. Like I said, I think they did all the spellcasters. I think they did a good job representing, except for Cleric. Like I said, I think Cleric is actually one of the worst representations out of all the class edges, just because they left out negative channeling and there's evil deities. So cool. Well, let's talk about our final thoughts. I think we don't really have to talk about ancestries, but let's talk about our final thoughts as far as class edges now that we've gone into it more. I have a couple. I just have one idea I want to get at, but let me get you so now we've gone through this, what's your general impression of them, or does this seem like a fun mechanic, or do you like how they did it now that we've really gone through it?
No, I still think it was a great approach to it. I mean, obviously we've got our opinions on good, bad for some of them, but I think it was a nice approach. I still would like to see, more there. So when you hit season, there's more to choose from. That's adds to the flavor. But I get it, right? This book is only so big; it can only be so much. And I mean, I get it. Plus, there's a lot of other edges already in Savage Worlds. I get it. But I think the class, and I said this in our previous video, I thought the class, it made sense to me. It's a cool representation. The way they handled things like wizards and sorcerers are just really impressive. Clerics, with those couple of caveats, they're really cool. I think it makes sense. I think there's a lot of little tweaks to make on some of the classes like monk and rogue that are easy to do. And so it fits. I think the framework.
Yeah, and I do think Monk is one that I actually don't think it's easy. That one's easy to homebrew. But yeah, as we read through it, I do like it more. I'm interested to try it. That it's not just the frameworks. Here's my big thought on this. Actually, is that I'm not sure about the APs because those are written to have certain balance. But if I was running a game with this, and I kind of want to actually, so maybe I'll run a game and you can play in it if you have time. But I'd almost continue the whole like free edge thing, in that I would play this as that every time you get to a new rank, you have a free edge that you can spend on class or prestige edges. So when you would get, you already have that at novice. So when you got to seasoned, how I would GM it is that just give them a free edge. Now that could either be to get a new class, to continue the one that you've already done, or to pick up a prestige class, just to get that feeling of the class is stronger.
So you're saying, you get an edge when you go to the next one and you have an edge, you could still spend your normal edge on something, and then you'd have a free one that you could pick up a class or a prestige edge or something.
You get,
that's more.
That's how I would play it personally. Just
sense.
Because, like what we said, there needs to be more. And in that case, you wouldn't really get to choose. But it almost kind of sucks that there's just so many edges out there that you'd have to kind of choose whether do I want to feel more like my class or choose something different. So that's how I would do it. But that's not necessarily how everybody would. But I do think. We've talked enough. I think. Let's leave it there. Is that some of them I love, some of them need some tweaking, right. But I do think that they came up with some really smart things here.
I think structurally it makes a lot of sense. I like it. Some of the classes are better put together and more interesting than others, but the structure
and some are just
strong,
mechanically weaker. Opinion. That's our main issue, right?
So
anyways.
Yeah, exactly. A better way of saying it. So we talked a little about skills. We talked a little bit about heritage, and we talked a lot about classes. So this is going to be.
Yeah,
if you're watching this video, you're watching the second half of a two-parter.
So the next one, we'll finish. The next video, we'll finish the edges. We'll talk about prestige edges. Then we'll probably get into some of the gear change. We'll just do the rest of it. So we'll probably have at least 2 more videos, I think, out of this.
We'll keep going as long as there's material to take on. So
I'm Eric.
So again, I'm Carl and we appreciate you watching Tabletop Tango. If you like it, subscribe. We'd love to have it.
Yeah. Thanks everybody.
We'll catch
Stay safe.
you next time.
Bye. It's a savage world. Strange as a wind war. It's a savage world. Classics to explore. It's a savage world.